Welcome to the program. Your host, Ron Whitlock. Our guest today, Mike Blum, has a master's in urban planning from Texas A&M University and is a partner and managing broker of NAI RGV in the Rio Grande Valley in Greater South Texas, USA. Mike, welcome to the program.
Good morning.
Mike's on the program to tell you and I why historically U.S. and Texas planners have overlooked, in his opinion, one of the most powerful economic regions along the Texas-U.S. border, that being Greater South Texas and the Rio Grande Valley. Why so important to the state economy and the national economy, this one little bitty region, Mike?
Well, it's in the numbers. When you look at the Rio Grande Valley, Brownsville to Roma Rio Grande City, we're a metropolitan area on the U.S. side of about 1.1, 1.2 million people today. That astonishes some of my friends who don't realize just how large the valley has grown. But on the other side of the border, just on the other side of the border, is another 1.7 to 2 million people. And that makes this binational region that we live in 2.5 to 2.8 to maybe even 3 million people today. Just the U.S. side, we're larger than 9 states. We're 48th in the nation in terms of population. When you combine the Mexico side to that population number, we jump way up on the list. Within 150 miles of the Rio Grande Valley, there's 8.2 million people and 2 million households. It's an important economic region, retail trade, manufacturing, U.S.-Mexico cross-border trade. In fact, on the U.S.-Mexico cross-border trade, if you look at Canada and the United States and Mexico, and all the trade that flows back and forth across all the ports of entry, to and from Canada, to and from Mexico, and you look at all the ports of entry, the Rio Grande Valley ports of entry together rank 6th in the nation in cross-border cargo traffic.
Yet has
dollar value wise.
Yet has no interstate highway system, and that's the main rub that most economists have in Greater South Texas and the nation, because those trucks that are going from Maquiladoras in Mexico, Saltillo, Matamoros, Reynosa, all the way to Detroit and other cities across the nation, represent and protect 700,000 jobs in the United States by virtue of those Maquiladora operations. Why does that be the case? Why is that the case?
That's a $64,000 question.
How do they protect jobs in Detroit, they being workers at a lower wage in Mexico rather than going offshore in the Far East?
If you're driving a General Motors product today, the odds are the seatbelt got manufactured in Reynosa. If you're driving a General Motors product or a Ford product, if you're driving a General Motors product, the odds are the radio system, the rack and pinion system, the anti-lock braking system, maybe even the dashboard got made in Reynosa.
Dashboards in Matamoros.
Dashboards in Matamoros and in Reynosa. If you're driving a Suburban, it got made in Saltillo, Mexico. The dashboard assembly got manufactured in McAllen in the Sugarland Business Park. There are 40 or 50 U.S. and foreign companies making product for the American automobile industry. And American automobile industry now includes Nissan, Toyota, Honda, Mitsubishi, BMW, because they're all manufacturing in the United States. And the reason they're manufacturing in the United States is because they need to be part of the NAFTA collection of countries. If you're not making it in a NAFTA country, you can't get the benefits of the lower tariffs. Prior to NAFTA, there were no Japanese companies in Reynosa. Today, there are 18. There are 32 foreign flags flying in Reynosa, and probably an equivalent number in Matamoros. Those are companies that came to the region because of lower wage opportunities, because of access to U.S. markets. That's a story that's not well known outside of our market.
And the recent phenomenon we understand is the fact that whereas those jobs were coming from, in most cases, the Rust Belt to South Texas and the Mexican border, were coming for the lower wages historically. Now they're coming because there are no replacement workers in the northeastern portion of the United States. northern Midwestern part of the United States, there are no workers to replace those that are retiring, those jobs that are being created.
That's correct. In fact, I think the stats would support that somewhere in the neighborhood of 40% of the workforce in Detroit metropolitan area will be retiring within the next 3 to 5 years.
That's why Fed Chairman Bernanke, when he says we're at zero population growth, we've got to have these immigrant workers, whatever form they may consider themselves to be, we've got to have them if our economy is going to survive.
It's just a numbers game. We're not growing people fast enough in this country to fill up the job hole. Now, Texas is in a much better place than most of the rest of the country, and the Rio Grande Valley even more so, because we have one of the lowest pools of available labor, 18 to 24, in the United States. I think by 2020 or 2015 or 2025, I can't remember the dates, the Rio Grande Valley will have more available labor in that lower age bracket than the state of Alabama, Mississippi, Georgia. The valley by itself will have more available labor. And that's a great signal for the future of our economy.
And that predominantly is because these are young, basically Hispanic, 88 to 92% Hispanic families who are having children.
That's true. And the University of Texas Pan American, South Texas College, University of Texas Brownsville, TSC, TSTC are all doing something with the educational infrastructure that's giving us a better trained, better able workforce that's better able to keep pace with the 21st century.
So, to go back to the original premise, Mike, and that is the fact that the planners in D.C., the planners in the state capitol in Austin, are not giving any kind of credence or importance to the fact that whereas there may be 1.2 million individuals living in the Rio Grande Valley on the U.S. side, on the other side there's 2.5 or more Mexican nationals, and those are not being placed into the mix as it relates to commerce, traffic across the bridges, and the interstates necessary to serve them on the United States side.
That's correct. And all you have to do is spend a little time in any of the border communities from Brownsville to Roma, Rio Grande City. We know, we live it every day, how our communities are impacted by cross-border vehicular traffic. If you look at the border crossings in the Rio Grande Valley, 35 million vehicles crossed the border in 2006. That's cars and trucks, and that's a two-way crossing. 35 million vehicles. In Laredo, it was only 15 million or 16 million last year. So there's significantly greater cross-border activity in the Rio Grande Valley than in anywhere else along the Texas-Mexico border, and yet we're not connected to an interstate system.
And the audience at this moment is looking at the graph that you provided and you prepared, and we provided to Amadeo Saenz, the managing director of TxDOT, 15,000 employees, largest agency in Texas, in creating and building highways. Now they're looking at that graph now. What does that graph show the audience?
Well, that graph shows the audience how all of the cross-border ports in the United States, Mexico, and Canada, the number of vehicles and the dollar value of trade crossing that border. And the green bar shows the ranking of the Rio Grande Valley ports when you put them all together, where we rank 6th nationally.
Now Laredo, which is ranking 2nd, as you notice on the graph, it's had a 300% increase since 1995. It's complete. It has an interstate completed at I-35 from San Antonio south. Rio Grande Valley of South Texas, ranking number 6, it's had a 280% increase, and those bridges and those interstates, not interstates completed at this point, 281 and 77 United States highways. Those serve Matamoros and Reynosa maquilas and the auto part manufacturers in those particular regions. Now recently the Lone Star State of Texas has seen a meltdown in some of its highway funding in the Lone Star State. The Rio Grande Valley and South Texas have had several of their bypass loops on US 281 North around Alice, Valfurious, Ben Bolt that have been cut back and taken off the drawing board because of a short-term funding problem. We talked to Amadeo Saenz, who's the managing director of TxDOT. Here's what he had to tell us about that particular problem.
we received tools by the legislature in 2001 and 2003, the Mobility Fund. We knew that the Mobility Fund was a short-term fix. It brought $6 billion worth of projects to the table. Those projects are moving forward. But that fund has to be paid back through the fees that the legislature identified. And until those fees are there that are used to pay back the fund, you can't go borrow more money against that. So we knew that the Mobility Fund was going to give us 4 or 5 years worth of projects. What happened was, in this 4 or 5 years, we had highway costs that skyrocketed. In fact, we had a 60% increase in highway cost. Normally, we think of normally in that 5-year period, about 4% per year would have been about 20%. But we had an increase of 60% in cost of construction. So a project in 2002 that cost $1 million today cost us $1.6 million. We thought it was going to cost us, based on our historic data, about 1.2. So $400 million more from other projects had to be used just to build that one project. So that's what caused the funding shortage. It's construction prices escalated. We had also, on the federal side, we had some rescissions where some of the money that the Federal Highway Administration and the federal government had said, you can plan on having this much money over this period of time, they've taken it back for the same reason. They got increasing costs in a lot of areas, so they've had to take some of that money back. So we now have more projects than money to move forward. And that's what we're going to have to work on with the legislature this next session, to find out how can we bring in some additional funding resources to move forward. One of them is that $5 billion constitutional amendment that was just passed. That will help us backstop some of these projects that we're having to delay because of the increasing congestion and the loss of federal funding.
There have been some claims that perhaps this funding meltdown, or however you want to characterize it, is being done to try and drive down these construction biddings and lettings and that sort of thing. Is that the case, or it's just you, because of these increases that you've been telling me about, caused you to have a financial shortage?
Those increases have in essence caused me to have a potential cash flow problem. Okay, I let a contract, I need to be able to pay for it. When projects cost me 40% more over a time period, that means I spent that much of my cash in that much shorter time period. So I have less cash to work with for other projects. So the only way I can do that is I have to cut down the number of projects. Not to bring down the cost, is just to make sure that I have the money to be able to pay those contractors. I could continue, if they wanted to work for free, I would continue to let $5 billion worth of work. I just couldn't pay for it. And I just don't want to get into that situation. I've got tools where I can have short-term borrowing. I've been using it. But I don't see a solution to my cost. So what we said is, let's step back the construction process, slow it down a little bit. I can stay within my cash flow as I identify what other tools I have to be able to move it forward.
Now, Mike, as you saw, Amadeo explained that there still is some potential relief for those particular projects getting back online, getting back under the construction mode by virtue of the fact that he has certain funding mechanisms. We did talk to Texas Governor Rick Perry via email. We sent him an email and asked him why not use the $8 billion in surplus that his own press staff indicated the state of Texas has in the bank in a surplus, use those dollars to fund the short-term financial difficulties that TxDOT has, which caused it to cut those particular projects, put them in a holding pattern, so to speak, or try to figure out a way by calling a special session of the Texas legislature to use $8 billion again in voter-approved bonds that the people of Texas have voted to use to fund better highways in the Lone Star State. Now, Texas Governor Perry's response to us via email and his press spokesperson was, Governor Perry does not plan to call a special session to deal with the TxDOT funding situation. Utilizing the estimated $8 billion state surplus, the transportation funding would be a short-sighted and one-shot funding source. Texas transportation needs require a long-term funding approach. Governor's press spokesman continues, the state should instead look for ways to return some of Texans' money to them, such as in the form of lower taxes. So in the meantime, the Lone Star State and South Texas, which you says needs to have these interstate highways completed, continuing to try and get those projects done. Any suggestions on your part of what the region needs to do to try and move forward?
Well, when you're talking about the region, you're talking about the lower valley, or the valley from, again, Brownsville to Roma, Rio Grande City. And I know that a lot of political leadership and economic development folks have gotten together and are talking about a series of different initiatives, all designed to find new funding mechanisms, perhaps some of them local funding mechanisms to break through the logjam.
That means with Austin not taking care of business and Washington, D.C. not taking care of business, then the region is going to have to bite the bullet, get together, and do it itself.
Yeah, that's essentially what I understand has been discussed. The question I would throw out, just as a person thinking outside of the box a little bit, is, are we asking the question, is the Valley getting its fair share? Texas talks about parity with the Federal Highway Administration, and Texas oftentimes criticizes the Federal Highway Administration because it doesn't get its fair share of federal highway dollars that are sent to Washington from the federal gas taxes that we pay. My question is does the Rio Grande Valley get its fair share of the state gasoline taxes and diesel taxes that are collected in the Valley? I don't know, but I also haven't been able to get the answer to the question, but it's a fair question.
Pat Townsend with the Mission Economic Development Corporation says it's a rescission on the federal level that is killing TxDOT's funding. And basically what was he saying?
He was saying that the feds are taking the money away. They're canceling projects or canceling funding coming down to Texas, and that translates into the Texas Department of Transportation has no choice because they don't have the dollars, the federal dollars, to do the projects that were previously going to be funded by the feds. And so something has to get cut, and what got cut is some of our projects.
Mike Allen, a friend of yours, the former head and chairman and president of the McAllen Economic Development Corporation, well known in Austin and Washington, D.C. We will not be able to compete, we being Texas and the United States, if we do not get these lanes built into the Rio Grande Valley. We've got to leverage our own local money if necessary, or we're going to lose big time.
Can't disagree with what Mike said. The Valley is, we have been a stepchild for a long time in Texas and outside of Texas. We didn't have the political clout to make things happen. And this is one of those situations where we got to get together and find solutions. Again, asking the right questions is critical to finding the right answers, and I'm not sure if the right questions are being asked.
The Rio Grande Valley, protecting 700,000 jobs in Detroit and across the nation by virtue of the Maquiladoras, providing automotive parts nationwide, keeping our automotive industry, which is somewhat in a decline at this particular moment. Is GM, is Ford, is Chrysler going to survive? Those thoughts being bannered about across the nation. Yet the region has no interstate highway system coming in to get those parts quickly under just-in-time delivery to the manufacturing plants on both sides. Sounds ridiculous.
Yes, it does. But that is the reality. And when you say 700,000 jobs, that may just be in one segment of the economy.
Yes.
And it may just only be in the central part of the United States, but there's manufacturing all over the United States. There's manufacturing in Canada. There's manufacturing in Mexico. It's all interconnected. We live in a global economy. We don't live in a local economy. We live in a global economy. And what you drive, your car, your television set, your computer, most everything you have today is made in multiple marketplaces, in multiple locations, by multiple different kind of people from all over the world. It's not just made in the USA any longer. That's a fact that has long since passed. The Maquila program, as a program by definition, the cross-border trade between the United States, Mexico, and Canada has exploded since NAFTA was approved. The Valley has been a beneficiary of that, and we've done extraordinarily well, notwithstanding the fact we didn't have an interstate. We're the largest metropolitan area in the United States not connected to an interstate.
Well, Lou Dobbs would say that these 700,000 jobs that you claim are being protected are in fact being cost when we lose jobs in the northern quadrant of the United States, in the Northeast. When the jobs are being lost, they're being lost by virtue of the maquilas along the Mexico border, rather than going offshore to wherever, whether that be China, India, Singapore. Is Lou Dobbs wrong?
Lou Dobbs is wrong, and Lou Dobbs has been wrong on a lot of things. This is one of those topics where he's very wrong, and he's never been down here to see the truth. The reality is Japanese manufacturers, Korean manufacturers, and maybe even soon Chinese manufacturers are making product in Mexico because they want to access the North American marketplace. The marketplace of consumption is the United States, but you have to make it and compete in a global economy, and that means you have to make it where the price is competitive in a global marketplace. It is entirely possible that within the next 3 to 5 years, the Chinese will be building cars in Mexico. Now, why would that be? Because they want to access the U.S. market. There's an automobile made in the United States today and in Mexico called Kia. Kia Motors is a huge Korean company. They didn't used to have a plant in the United States. I went to Korea in 1990 with Mike Allen and the folks from Allen Economic Development Corporation, and we met with the Kia people before they ever built a plant in the United States. The reason they came to the United States was to access the North American marketplace. They're making cars in Mexico, they're assembling on the United States. It's good for the country, and it's good for the automobile industry. Now, have there been jobs lost? Sure. There's going to be jobs lost in a global marketplace, but there's been tens of thousands of jobs created in other places to make up for them. It's an unfortunate situation, but that's just the world we live in.
Stay tuned. Till next time, adios.